Hello, and welcome back to another episode of The Perfect Record. A bit of a first for the podcast this week. We're going to, in the lead up to Alvarez v. John Ryder, we're going to look at two of their fights against a common opponent in Callum Smith, break down the fights and see if that gives us any better insight into how it might go out when they do get in the ring together in Mexico. Rob, how are you finding your bank holiday weekend?
Beautiful bank holiday. It always lands on the snooker World Championship final. It's always a treat. This bank holiday, and then of course running into another one next weekend. That is class. But I must say I won't be watching the coronation. That's for damn sure.
Right, you're getting the bunting out, Chris. What about you? Is Mum having a street party?
I highly doubt it, mate. I mean, Stephen Bunting might be about, but I'm not too sure.
Doing the birdies a word down the street.
Yeah, maybe.
So let's get into it then. So, Saul Canelo Alvarez is fighting John Ryder in Mexico. John Ryder's kind of come from nowhere, really, hasn't he? To get this mandatory position. I mean, Zach Parker had sort of falsely orchestrated himself into it. We'll get it rolling though. So Ryder v Smith, a fight that Callum Smith did win on points, but it was somewhat disputed. Chris, how did Ryder make it awkward for Smith?
I think he just was able to control the range, his range a lot of the time there. Like, Smith, he's been known for being huge at that weight in the past. I think that fight proved that he did stay there too long. I think even before that fight, the signs were there that once he beaten Groves, he should have stepped up. He'd won his title. And I think once he won that, he was just waiting for his opportunity with Alvarez. But now, coming into it, I think that just the southpaw stance of Ryder put him off, and he was just outworking Smith a lot, even though Smith usually is very good. He's not really, for a big man, he's not really known for his work at range. We saw Smith last time out where it was in close quarters. Obviously, his main shot being the left hook. And I think that Ryder was just able to control the distance well to, obviously he didn't get the win, but to really, really put some pressure onto Smith.
As you can see, early in this fight, Ryder on the front foot, Smith kind of being the counter-puncher, Ryder getting some decent body shots in early doors. I mean, we'll kind of discuss it as we go on, Rob, but it was a contentious decision, but do you feel like Ryder should have got the nod here?
Yeah, massively. I think, like Chris said, Callum Smith was really stretching it at 168. He's a huge guy. You can see here just how much bigger he is. John Ryder is a bulky super middleweight, and to go up against a guy who's 6'3", that just goes to show how big Callum Smith was at the weight, and he is looking a lot better at light heavyweight than what he is currently. But I think one of Callum Smith's issues is he's boxing okay in the first few rounds here, but I think he kind of gets lulled into an inside battle against Ryder in this fight, because you can see there a lot of the stuff at range, Callum Smith doesn't really pop off his jab enough for me. And I think that's almost a criticism of the man on screen there, Joe Gallagher. Like, a lot of his fighters are inside fighters, and Callum Smith should have been using that long lever, that jab, and keeping John Ryder on the end of it. However, he got lulled into these affairs here, like you can see on the ropes, John Ryder working the body, pushing him back to the ropes. And you'd think Callum Smith, traditionally, is a counterpuncher, that Callum Smith would have been able to box well off the ropes. But Ryder, I think he looks very basic in what he does, but I do think there's some skill in there. I think that Ryder picks his moments well. Like, he's not a volume puncher, is he? But he lets off punches in bunches at short range when he feels it's safe to do so. And, Alvarez is a guy who traditionally has done really, really well against fighters who come at him and throw punches. Like, you're looking at the likes of Liam Smith and Alfredo Angulo and James Kirkland, them sorts of guys. And John Ryder isn't going to come and do that. He's a bit more educated. You can see here, like, he's picking his moments. He's not just lunging in there. He's staying on the outside, waiting for an opportunity, and then he starts to push Smith back to the ropes. And I think he'll need every ounce of that know-how to get through rounds here against Alvarez.
Well, yeah, we'll need all that know-how, won't he, Chris? I mean, his last fight was against Zach Parker, who effectively shit it, and it's kind of hard to distinguish how good Ryder was, although he's undoubtedly on a good run of form at the minute. Is that going to be enough to even make it competitive against Alvarez, Chris?
No, it isn't. We've said before about fighters going in, beating a certain level of opposition, but then like the goal, like to jump that many levels above and expect to win it's just very unlikely. And I think that we're watching now, obviously, Ryder try and cut down the ring space and be using his front foot pressure and trying to walk Smith down. I think having that sort of style against Canelo just plays into Canelo's hands, because Canelo loves it on the inside. Obviously, that Mexican style, whipping in his shots. So I just think that going into that, obviously, Parker, it was quite a well manufactured career for a few fights with Frank Warren, getting him shock horror the WBO title, like mandatory shot, which is where Ryder's got this from. And I think he did all right there. I think he weathered the storm early and then just clearly showed he just put the pressure on Parker, and he didn't fancy it, like you said earlier. But I just think that Ryder's got it all to do, and I think that he's going to needs. I think it would be the biggest upset in British boxing history if Ryder were to win and become undisputed champion.
Oh, no doubt. I mean, hats off to John Ryder for even getting into this position, Rob. Really, you look at some of the career he's had. He's a journeyman, isn't he? You know, he's lost to Rocky Fielding, for goodness sake.
Yeah, I think the Fielding fight, like, Fielding was a good fighter at that stage. I know he had that round one stoppage to Callum Smith, but I think his style was all wrong for Callum Smith. And we know, like I said before, Callum Smith wants you to come at him. He wants to be able to counter punch. And that win was almost made Rocky Fielding look a lesser fighter than what he is. And Rocky Fielding was a good fighter at that stage, confident and a hard puncher. And I think Ryder has done well. Since stepping up in weight, I think he's done really well. Obviously, his biggest win today, Danny Jacobs, that was a really close fight, I felt. And Danny Jacobs was a guy who's obviously been in there with Golovkin, gave him massive issues, had a close points decision with Canelo. He's always looked good in losing. And John Ryder gave him a really good fight. It was clever, it was aggressive when he needed to be. And I think that's where Ryder picked up this mandatory kind of status. Like, you can see here, like he's applying the pressure on Callum Smith, and I think Smith was tied to the weight here, and then body shots are what's getting Ryder through these rounds. Like, but he can't afford to. It's almost like you've got to have a balance against Alvarez. You can't come out there and be too aggressive, but also look where Alvarez struggled with Bivol the most. Like, you can't just throw a 1-2 punch combination against Alvarez. You have to do this a little bit, and he does like to be on the ropes, Alvarez, and box off it. And you kind of have to throw combinations against him in the hope that one of them punches, one of them hooks, because that's where Ryder has his strength. If you watch, like, his uppercuts and hooks are his strongest punches. You don't notice him committing to his jab very often. It's the hooks that come to the body, the uppercuts to the middle. They're his best punches, and I think he'll need to throw in combination to land against Alvarez. But it's just so dangerous, like we were saying, when Alvarez's best performances, his early knockouts, are guys who come to fight him. Like Amir Khan's another one who came out there and tried to use his speed and be aggressive against Alvarez. And obviously we know what happened there, one big counter punch, and that's lights out for Amir Khan. So it's a massive ask for John Ryder. Like, nobody's expecting him to go out there and get this win. Like, I don't begrudge him it. You know, like this fight here, I believe that he won this fight, and you can see him like pressing on late in the fight. I just think that Callum Smith didn't do enough fighting. Like it, I think Callum Smith's footwork was slightly exposed as well in this one. Like, you know, he backed up in straight lines and Ryder pushed him back to the ropes. Like, these are the championship rounds now, and you can see like Callum Smith, his back's touching the ropes almost every single time, just one direction, backwards and backwards. And he almost looks like he's fighting off Ryder, not like being competitive, but just throwing back when he feels he needs to. And it weren't good enough for me. Like, Ryder definitely won this fight. But, I mean, after this, we'll look at Canelo Alvarez's destruction of Callum Smith. And I think that shows the levels coming into this one, because Alvarez, well, we all know he's been fighting on the world class level for years, whereas John Ryder, unfortunately, has been fighting on that contender level just below that.
I'm obviously really hesitant to speak up a win for Ryder, but I really do think, Chris, that he could put in, a good account of himself. And given that Alvarez is looking to potentially step up again to light heavy for that rematch against Bivol, there could be belts on the line if Alvarez were to vacate. If especially given that Ryder does hold the interim belt at WBO, do you think he can go in and give a good account of himself? I mean, I feel like he's the right age. He's been in title fights before. He's fought high-level opponents before. He's not going to be a mug, let's say.
No, I wouldn't call him useless. He's a level above, let's say, Yildirim, who Canelo fought a few years ago. But I just think that he's there to make Canelo look good, because if we go through Canelo, his last few fights, for me personally, I think we've seen the best of Canelo Alvarez now. I just believe that although he became undisputed champion at the super middleweight division, it was against a weaker set of super middleweight champions, particularly in recent years. You know, we saw Billy Joe Saunders, who was a pumped up middleweight, and hadn't really been tested at the elite level before. Caleb Plant, who frustrated him early. Obviously, he got the concussive punch at the end, and then obviously beat Avni Yildirim. But like, I think that the more he goes up, he fluctuates between these weight divisions. We're not going to see the best of him. But I do believe that this sort of fight is the type to really, really get Canelo back rolling. But it'll be interesting to see what Canelo does should he win, because I believe that Bivol now wants to fight at 168 just to prove that he can beat him at Canelo's own weight. But obviously, I'm not sure Canelo would want that, because the risk of losing to Bivol at 175 and 168 isn't bear thinking about. So we'll have to wait and see. But Rob, going into the fight, who do you think will be the naturally bigger man? Will it be Alvarez or Ryder?
I think they'll be exactly the same weight. I think when you stand them next to each other, they almost look like twins, don't they? It's weird, like, even though the heritage is so different. I do think they're very, very similar in stature and the kind of muscle bound they have on there, and that'll help Ryder get through rounds. He's a big man. Looking here at this fight, the Callum Smith fight, like, before even getting onto anything, it must be said that Callum Smith was given so little time to prepare. Do you remember how many weeks it was, Chris? It was
5 or 6 maximum.
5 or 6. That's classic Alvarez, isn't it? Taking away the advantage of his opponents. At least John Ryder's had a little bit more time to get into camp. And is he in LA currently, John Ryder, with Conor Benn doing some sparring?
Yeah. I believe he must be, to be honest, with the fight obviously being in Mexico.
Yeah, you want to get seasoned before being in the ring with somebody like Canelo. But just going on what you were saying, this version of Canelo right here, I believe, is the one right after the two Golovkin fights. And I think, for me personally, the Golovkin fights took a lot out of Alvarez. They were great fights. I think even though the third fight didn't live up to it, I think in terms of modern day trilogies, Alvarez versus Golovkin is the best in the last 20 years, probably the best modern day trilogy since Riddick Bowe versus Evander Holyfield. You know, that kind of caliber. You know, Tyson Fury Wilder was obviously a good one, but I don't believe the quality was as good as Golovkin 1 and Golovkin 2 for Alvarez. But I think after them fights for Canelo, it wasn't as good a version of Alvarez. Maybe maybe it's the size catching up to him. Like here, you've got a guy in Callum Smith who really was incredibly negative in this fight. Like literally, you can see just watching it, not even competitive, simply in survival mode a lot of the time. And Alvarez is really good at applying the pressure, making guys panic, making guys, give away energy when they don't want to. Like Callum Smith is constantly going back to the ropes here. Like we've seen that weakness in the Ryder fight, but you have to hold your ground against Canelo. Like if you watch the Bivol fight back, how many times did Bivol circle to centre ring? Like another thing I've noticed just watching this is watch where Callum Smith is constantly circling to his right. There's never any like difference in his movement. Like you always know where he's going to go.
There's no really...
There's just no variation. Like what Bivol did well is when Canelo did back him up. Canelo's one of Canelo's weaknesses is his feet aren't really fast, so you should be able to move him around the ring. And Callum Smith just circling in the same direction time and time again. It's the reason why he had so much trouble with Alvarez. Is he needed to take centre ring and he needed to back up Alvarez, and John Ryder's going to need to do that if he has any hope in this fight.
I think that one of Canelo's main tactics in this fight, wasn't it, is targeting not even the body of Callum Smith, literally the bicep of his left arm, because they found out that Callum Smith's only real danger shot is the left hook. So I think
just work the arm.
By round 7 or 8, I believe Smith said that like he literally, it felt like just a horrible dead arm where he could barely lift it to throw the left hook.
Who do you think? How will what will Canelo do to make it hard for Ryder then?
I think it's this kind of pressure, like you can see him applying here, like I was saying about Bivol. Bivol picked his moments to fight with Alvarez and also picked his moments not to. Like if you watch the Bivol fight back, you'll notice Canelo really struggled to get Bivol to engage when he wanted to. Like Canelo has this thing where he'll back up to the ropes and try and possum his guy in so Canelo can throw counter punches. And Bivol never did that. Bivol never got lulled into any of them traps. Like Alvarez has this thing where you'll see it here. Do you see how he leans his head forwards and like says to his opponent, "Go on, hit me in the head." He'll put his guard up, and then the opponent will try and counter, and he'll just slip out and then start throwing punches. So I think the trick is for Ryder to make it difficult for Alvarez is he can't throw when Alvarez is setting up his counter punches. He has to stay off the ropes, make sure that he doesn't do what Callum Smith's doing here and backing up to the ropes on every occasion. He needs to vary his footwork. He needs to go left, right, spin off when he's throwing his hook, because Callum Smith has a really good left hook, but he never turns off and just languishing on the ropes like he is here. That is asking for trouble against a guy like Alvarez. So what Ryder has to do is use his smarts, box only, fight when he wants to fight, throw combinations when he needs to, and of course get on his bike when he needs to, just like Dimitri Bivol did.
Do you reckon Callum Smith could have done any different had he had more time, or do you reckon that the plan with Joe Gallagher and that gym was always just to try and get the payday and survive? Because obviously we saw more recently Inoue against Butler, where it was pretty similar performance by Butler, where he just didn't trade with Inoue and just tried to get through the round.
Personally, I make there's no qualms about it for me. Like you see it there, just backing up in straight lines, got caught with an overhand right, flush in the chin. Joe Gallagher's tactics are not good enough for world-class boxing. Like, how many of Joe Gallagher's fighters do you seeing exactly what Callum Smith did then? Like, putting on the ear mitts and covering up. Like, just covering up. You're still taking punches. Like, you have to slip punches. You have to tie Alvarez up. You have to have some defensive smarts. And I just think that none of Joe Gallagher's fighters have any defensive nuance at all. There's no like skill set in terms of defensive work. Like they're all good, strong, combative lads who come forwards and throw good punches. But when they're being backed up and when they have to defend punches, they are so basic in the way that they defend shots.
What's the future, Chris, for Canelo? Let's assume that he gets past Ryder, fairly convincingly. He obviously suffered defeat to Bivol. Will he go back up? He struggles to find dancing partners as it is. So he could fight anyone really, and it'd be a big payday. But for legacy-wise, I feel like he does need, a tougher test than say John Ryder.
To be honest, I think there's not many big fights in there for him. I've got to be honest. I think that obviously, I believe it will be Bivol next. I believe that all we need to do is look at what Maurizio Sullivan has come out today and said that he will not be sanctioning an undisputed fight between Beterbiev and Bivol. And he claims it's because of the morals of the war. When let's be fair, we all know that Maurizio Sullivan has no morals. So the fact is that he's trying to make sure that no fight gets in the way of Canelo trying to right his previous defeat. So I think that's the one they're all gearing up for. But for me, I think that light heavyweight is just too far to go. I think he's moved to super middle. I think that's him maxing out. I think that obviously he can't go down to middleweight now and try and fight a Yanni Beck or anything like that. So I think the only option is to fight the Mexican who beat Caleb Plant the other week.
Benavidez. Yeah. He seems to be the one that people want the most, in it, Benavidez. The other one linked at 168 is Jamal Charlo, isn't it?
Yeah.
Which I don't really like that fight. I don't see what Charlo's done to deserve that. I think Charlo has good wins on his record, but has never beaten anyone world class. I'm not a huge fan of Jamal Charlo, to be honest. I think he's a bit of a cherry picker. I think the one guy who would beat Alvarez at 168 is Demetrius Andrade, but Canelo is never going to take that fight with Andrade, is he?
Well, Andrade just doesn't seem to be fighting anytime recently, does he? I think that his career's just been one of the most poorly managed careers
in boxing, yeah. Talent-wise, what a fighter he is. Like, he caused a lot of problems to Alvarez stylistically. I just think that what's come out today on Twitter is, the kind of backlash with Maurizio Sullivan and the Russia thing, and that Alvarez is just saying that the last like quote from Alvarez is that he's going to step up to 175 again to face Bivol because the fans want him to step up to 175 to face Bivol. Personally, I cannot see him beating Bivol at that weight. I think his only chance against Bivol is to, like he's done with Callum Smith here, break him down to a lower weight class. I know that Callum Smith did that voluntarily, but I think that he has to break Bivol down to 168, and then he has a chance, doesn't he, at doing what he's done here with Callum Smith and beating him up and breaking him down. And you see Callum Smith there looking at the time, like he was desperate to get out of this fight on points, weren't he? Like he was literally fighting for a points loss here, which is quite sad because he was a world champion at this stage.
Do you believe that if this fight was at 175, Smith would have pushed Canelo at all?
I seriously think that Callum Smith, unfortunately, isn't a very well-rounded fighter. I think that Alvarez is an elite level fighter, and he'll always come out on top against a Callum Smith. Bivol's elite, Beterbiev's elite. Those are the guys that would beat Canelo at 175, in my opinion.
He's not quite. I mean, he's still, one of the biggest names, if not the biggest in boxing. But he had a really good COVID period. It seemed Canelo. He was fighting. He was on that deal where he was fighting 4 times a year. Kind of handpicking his opponents, you could say. He's not really. Caleb Plant was a semi-big fight because it was to take the belts off Caleb Plant, but he really doesn't. he does need a big dancing partner to claim that
They built
pound for pound title back, doesn't he?
Yeah, I think that's what the Golovkin third fight was like. Golovkin was the biggest reputation at that time for the easiest win of options that were out there. Like,
I think they thought Golovkin would have a bit more left in the tank, didn't they?
Yeah, and Golovkin really disappointed me that night. Like, I thought his win against Murata, even though he struggled, I thought that was a great win for Golovkin, and I really hoped he was going to take it to Alvarez. But Golovkin did what Callum Smith's just done there, like accepted defeat a little bit against Canelo, and John Ryder can't afford to do that. If you were to put a prediction on the fight after watching them, what way would you go, boys?
Canelo round 5.
Early one. What are you saying, Phil?
I think wide points for Canelo.
Yeah, I think John Ryder can get through rounds personally. But I reckon that Alvarez is going to break him down with body work. Like, I think that John Ryder is quite cute, fighting when he needs to fight, and he'll avoid headshots. But I reckon, very similar to the Liam Smith fight, where Alvarez will eventually break him down with that left hook to the body, and beat him. Maybe a round 10 stoppage for Alvarez.
I'm just expecting a vicious Alvarez, to be honest, because I just think that obviously it might work well, it might work bad, but obviously the amount of fights he had in a short period of time over that COVID period and whatnot, and obviously then having the Bivol and then jumping 2 months later into the Golovkin fight, it could make you go flat and he could have niggles, whereas now he's been out of the ring about 8 or 9 months, which is unheard of for him.
Yeah, it is. We'll leave some fight videos playing whilst we break onto the other stuff, but I think it's worth just sticking on the Bivol fight one. But we'll leave some videos on just for our YouTube viewers to see a little bit more action whilst we go through the rest of the pod.
Yeah, keep it rolling, and some good news to report, really.
See that as a good thing, but I also thought that Joe Goosen personally was a little bit old. So I think he's right to drop Goosen, but I do think that
because that was 6 years old this weekend. Chris, where were you 6 years ago? Where did you watch that fight?
I watched it in a pub in the countryside. This pub we were at, I remember, refused to pay for the fight, so they got one of the locals to bring his Xbox down and found a stream.
Class.
That's meant. Whereabouts was that?
It was the ostrich, just in Derbyshire country.
Oh, nice. Actually, we can tie it in with my what if of the week. What if Vladimir Klitschko had won this fight?
Oh, I like that.
I think Vladimir Klitschko should have won this fight. I really do. I think that Joshua, if you watch the fight back, the first few rounds are quite even, where Joshua gets a little frustrated in the 5th round, and he comes out because Klitschko is landing on him like this from range. I think that Klitschko was getting the better of that tactical battle at range, and then Joshua in round 5 decides to blow his full gasket. Look at the size of Joshua in this fight. This is prime Joshua muscle bound, isn't it?
What was he, about 18.5?
This was his highest ever weight, and you can tell he's massive, but also he's punching very hard as well. And I think we're getting
happy to have a scrap.
Yeah, we're getting to that 5th round now, and I think this is prime AJ confidence. And in round 5, he just comes out from the very first second and just puts it on Klitschko, doesn't he? It'll be coming up very shortly. He literally just bites down on the gum shield and throws everything into it, but unfortunately, completely empties the gas tank doing so.
Do you reckon Klitschko could have made it easy for himself if he'd literally just resorted back to his jab and grab style?
I think that's what he tried to do, and this is where I think it went wrong for Klitschko in this fight, where in this 5th round here, after Joshua comes out throwing everything behind it, Joshua gasses himself out after this prolonged attack, and he doesn't really find any killer blows on Klitschko to stop him. So Klitschko goes down and shows a lot of heart to get back up, and Joshua's gassed at that stage, and I truly believe Klitschko should then have emptied the gas tank and knocked out Joshua instead of allowing him to get back. get his second win, because Joshua, how many rounds does it take him in this fight to catch his second win?
Yeah, he must have.
He was in so much bother, wasn't he?
I mean, this is the most confident version of AJ. This, isn't it? I remember, like, after he got hurt, he was like talking to Klitschko, winding him up and stuff.
Yeah, it just, like, watching this fight back now as well. It is weird how, like, AJ doesn't actually have a bad chin. Like, he's taken a lot of heavy shots here, but we've probably not seen the same AJ since this fight, have we? Really?
No, you believe this is the fight that began the finish of Anthony Joshua's career, don't you?
Yeah, because who did he go on to fight after? Was it Parker?
Ruiz, weren't it? Oh no, Parker. Yeah, it was.
Parker was a ball fest, wasn't
I
it?
think he had Takam as well, where he struggled with him. Obviously against smaller opponents, which AJ's renowned to be poor against. But
yeah, he took a couple of safety first fights after this. Like, the Pulev was a mandatory defence, and obviously that left up was huge, weren't it? He nearly had him out there. Klitschko, this is the round here where he should have got rid of him. Look at Joshua after he got pushed back.
He's pretty dazed, isn't he? And his hands are down.
He's gassed and he's shook. Look at his footwork. He's all over the place. Like, Klitschko should absolutely have just put everything into it.
You forget though, Klitschko was basically retired at this point, and he must have been 18 months since the Fury fight.
Another good what if is, and this is going back to it, I think that's a really good question. What if Klitschko won this fight? And I think if Klitschko did rematch Fury, Klitschko would have beat Fury in a rematch. I think that Fury did brilliantly in the first fight to tactically get into Klitschko's head before the fight, make Klitschko gun shy throwing punches. But you can see in this fight, this version of Klitschko in this fight, I think would have caused Tyson Fury a load of problems at that stage in his career. Like,
do you think he could have gone on and like tried to become undisputed again against Wilder because Wilder might have fancied it? Obviously, a 40-odd-year-old man.
Yeah, what a great story that would have been. What a story that would have been if he did manage to do that.
And you'd think if he was able, like, if Klitschko could just basically keep jabbing and tying up Wilder and not letting him have the space to land his long looping right hands.
That's that right hand there. I thought in this fight, watching it back, that age, when a Klitschko at that stage, in his fight strategies, it used to just be long left jab, right hand behind it, didn't end any grab, and he started introducing this left hook after that, and it was the left hook that took out Pulev. But I think in this fight, that left hook really let him down. Like there, for example, do you see, like, Joshua could see that punch again, even when Joshua was hurt. He could see that punch coming, and I think he put too much into throwing that left hook. He should have just focused on the right hand down the pipe.
I think we could have maybe seen a Vlad return if it hadn't been for COVID and the Ukraine war, because he was teasing it, wasn't he?
I think he got robbed a little bit by Fury not getting that rematch. I think Fury took a lot of years off Klitschko during that kind of, are they all right, they're going to do the rematch. And of course, they did a press conference for the Fury Klitschko 2 fight and Tyson Fury turned up, that was the
They had another one, didn't they, where Fury was a no-show completely, saying his car broke down.
Yeah, at that stage, he was a total mess, weren't he? He turned up to the first fight, just exposing his stomach and just saying, look at this fat cunt beat you. Like, you cannot do that in a press conference. It's just, it was fun. It was funny, but come on.
Would that have been about in the middle of the drug case on him, do you reckon?
Yeah. I think he knew at that stage that their time were up. And of course, it didn't even just affect, a lot of people think it was just Tyson Fury. Hughie Fury was also banned for 2 years after that offence. But what a fight this was, though. Like, it was just a classic war of attrition, weren't it? But I just think that at this stage, by round 9, Joshua's managed to catch his breath a bit, whereas it was them middle rounds where Klitschko should have took him out, and I just think he put too much emphasis on the left hook and should have just looked to land that one, the sledgehammer, as they call it, like 1-2 down the middle.
This is where, as well, watching Joshua, it just makes you think that I think he's in a much better position being with someone like Rob McCracken, who literally knows him inside and out. Like, he knows exactly what makes him tick and his flaws and how to hide his flaws and get him on the right track. but having these American trainers who they might be really good trainers, but being able to, it's not just about making them the best fighter, it's knowing mentally what gets the best out of them.
Yeah, correct. It's all about that relationship. And as well, what I've noticed about these two trainers is none of them have ever trained heavyweights. It's a different sport, is heavyweight boxing to standard boxing. Like, great trainers they are, but heavyweight boxing is, you look at the coaches throughout history who's affected heavyweights, and the only real one that I can think of in the last few years is obviously Emmanuel Stewart, who got the best out of heavyweights. I think it takes a certain type of trainer to get the heavyweights, and it's not necessarily this guy's done a great, that uppercut was devastating, weren't it? This guy's done a great job with Errol Spence Jr. or Robert Garcia is a good pressure fighter coach. Let's go with him. Like, it doesn't necessarily mean they know how to get the best out of a big heavyweight like Joshua.
Yeah, I think that could have been one of Klitschko's demises as well, because I've never really rated Jonathan Banks much as a trainer.
Yeah, that's 6 years ago now.
Yeah, scary.
Where were you to watch it, Rob?
Oh, mate, I had an absolute nightmare for this one. I ended up, we arranged to meet for it, and it ended up getting called off late, and I tried streaming it, and it was back in them days, 2017, there weren't really a lot of stable streams, and my stream cut off in round 4, so I missed the round 5 knockdown and the round 6 knockdown, and then I ended up tuning back in time to watch that uppercut land and the big knockout, so it brings back some bad memories to this fight, but I probably had a better view of it, even though I couldn't see it, than somebody who sat, one of them 80,000, one of the guys who was sat all the way back in the God seats. Like, you can't even see the bloody fighters landing, can you, from there? Can't even see the fighters.
It shows how tough Klitschko is, though, literally forcing himself to get up from that uppercut.
Yeah.
I think Klitschko went into this fight saying all the right things. You know, remember, it was like, what was his slogan going into this? It was
he had that memory stick offering to sell it after the fight, going, "This is how I defeat Joshua."
But do you not think this was the perfect build up for a fight? Like, two men who respected each other, sparred together, like they knew what they were capable of, but there was still some needle there. Like, even after he knocks him out here, Joshua, he looks at him and laughs a bit, doesn't he? Like, there's definitely needle there.
I think Joshua needs it.
Yeah, I do. And I think the only reason I think if Joshua had the same war then, now he wouldn't get through it. He got through that on pure balls and confidence back then. And I think if he had...
It's not knowing how to taste defeat either, is it? Not knowing what the feast is like. But now he knows, it's like, oh.
And unfortunately, the Ruiz fight, he did kind of throw in the towel in that one, didn't he? And I know physically... I
reckon he got concussed, didn't he?
Yeah, he got concussed and he was fatigued, and that makes cows of men. But
he didn't see the shot, which was the worst part of that one, really. That's what hurt him.
But he never got stopped by a punch, did he? The referee asked him if he was fit to continue, and he just showed all the signs of a fighter who didn't want to continue.
And then he tried calling blue murder for it being stopped by the end, didn't he?
Yeah, we've seen that happen all too often in boxing. And going on to... I put a tweet out this week, one of my classics, but Chris Eubank Jr. trying to claim this week that he wasn't hurt he should have been allowed to continue in the Liam Smith fight. Let's get up them highlights just for sheer banter.
Yeah, so the rematch has been announced, hasn't it? Smith, Eubank Jr. 2. Is Cruz Dezern Marshall on the same card?
Yes.
Oh, wow, that's excellent.
It's a box office card, though. Does that make it box office?
I don't know, but you've got to respect...
I think so.
You've got to respect Sky, because they clearly know that this fight isn't really box office. It's just Chris Eubank asked for too much money. But they, remember that they had quite a strong undercard for this, show last time?
They knew they had to bulk it up, don't they, a bit?
Do either of you give Eubank Jr. any chance in this rematch?
No.
I do, yeah.
I think he's a shot fighter, particularly at 160.
I just think, and again, going back to this knockout, I might be really wrong here, but I just think Chris Eubank Jr. tactically here just makes a massive error. Like, he's not grabbing, he just tries to slip. Clever. Yeah, he does. He's got too cocky for his own good. And there's a man who needs continuing right there. He knows exactly where he is.
Family on eyes. Do you either of you buy into the elbow claim that
Yeah.
it was an
No,
elbow that.
it's just the Eubanks, innit? Because if they didn't have the elbow, going into the fight, like going into this fight, they'd have no bargaining chip. Like no one would be calling for a rematch at all. Whereas they're trying to lean on anything, like I've heard other people say, you can see the true fighter's opinion at the second the fight's ended, and when it ended, Chris, who clearly wasn't hurt by any of those flush shots,
That uppercut was the one, wasn't it?
Yeah. And then
but,
the one
yeah,
to the temple after, just for good measure.
but yeah, as soon as it happened, like Chris Eubank was like, "Yeah, the better man won." Like fair play. And then as soon as he gets back in his dressing room, he's like, "I wasn't hurt. There was an elbow."
Thing is, say what you like about the Eubanks personally, you know my thoughts on them, but they know they have to lie to sell a fight, don't they? They have to say, I wasn't hurt, or next time it'll be different, you know, because nobody will buy the fight if they don't. And Eubank Jr. and Eubank Senior, they want to make money from this game, don't they?
Yeah, but I think
That's why he's going on that Room in the Dark show, his dad.
It's on what?
What was it, Chris? Some show with Paul Gascoigne where Paul Gascoigne and Gazza were getting in an argument, stuck in the dark or something.
yeah, clearly short of some money. But I just think that the fact he's staying with Roy Jones Jr. is a really poor thing to do.
Oh, I didn't know that. I didn't know he was staying with him.
Yeah, he's staying with him. Robbie Davis. What's it? Ronnie Davis has basically said he can't box like Roy Jones Jr. So I hope he's not going to try it again. But I think that what happened was basically Eubank was actually not doing too bad in the first 2 or 3 rounds, like just on the back foot, on the jab.
Yeah.
And obviously, I think he got overconfident when Smith just let him hit him with about 6 uppercuts at the end of the 3rd round, didn't he?
That was the problem. I think, like, the reason I've put this one on, this highlight, is uppercuts happen where the glove doesn't land. Like this knockout here, Lubin was an undefeated fighter, Charlo was undefeated, and he actually hit him with his forearm in that example. You know, like, things happen in boxing where it's not necessarily a glove that lands, and that's okay. Like, this fight wasn't scratched off because the forearm landed. Like, it happens.
Yes, if he talks about the Warriors Code, then he can't be moaning about an elbow, can he? It's going to happen.
I go back to the fact, though, that I think Eubank Jr. just got way too complacent with Liam Smith's power and thought he could mug him off, and obviously he couldn't.
I think the weight had a lot to do with it, didn't it? Like, obviously him getting down to 160 at the best of times isn't going to be easy, but the fact that he boiled down to 157 or whatever, then had about 3 weeks off, and then had to get his body back down to 160.
I don't know how he had them £3 to lose, because this weighing, like, it doesn't have any fat on him at all, does it? Where does them £3 come off? Like, it's frightening.
Yeah, but is that down to a bad weight cut that his body's like that, or do you reckon he can make it better?
Possibly, could be. I just think he's 33 years old.
It's his legs for me, which look really, really unhealthy. Like, you can see there's no liquid in his legs at all.
Yeah, it's hard to see it going any other way, isn't it? And I mean, to be honest, I think, let's say Eubank did get through it, he's not a good enough boxer to fight for world titles. Whereas Liam Smith, I really do think that in the condition he's in at the minute, he could go and fight for world titles, and British boxing needs that. And
I'm sure Ben Shalom will be on the phone and ring up Kell Brook to fight him.
Apparently, this is Liam Smith's final fight with box now, isn't it? He's had a 3-fight deal with them. The first one, if you remember, was a horrendous fight where an opponent ended up quitting. And of course, his second fight was Eubank Jr., and that lasted 4 rounds. And this is his last one now with them. So it'd be interesting to see what Liam Smith does do if he is to win. Does he go back with Eddie? You know, where does he go next if he is to win again?
I tell you what about Liam Smith, though, is I don't know whether you saw the press conference last week, but it looks like he's carrying a lot of fat around the belly.
Yeah, because he's thinking this is his last payday before retirement.
Possibly, yeah. On that No, lads, I think we'll call it a day for this podcast. Thanks for joining us. We will be back next week to look at the Smith Ryder fight. I think we're all in agreement that it's surely going to be not Smith Ryder, sorry, Canelo Alvarez Ryder fight. All in agreement that it's going to be a Canelo victory. Thanks for joining me. See you next week. Cheers, guys.